I found out my wife was cheating during my father's funeral. This is how I reacted. Dad's eulogy paused when my wife's phone lit up. Room 214. The pastor's voice, soft as the tissue boxes in every pew, floated on. I was Noah, 35, paramedic on the weekday shifts, carpenter on weekends when grief needed wood to work through. Dad lay in the open casket with the stubborn dignity he wore to every breakfast. Sloane stood 2 rows up. Perfect hair, the sort of posture that makes sympathy look curated. I caught the second banner. We're checked in. A thumbnail map pin blinked on her lock screen, then vanished when she pressed the side button without looking. She didn't realize I'd seen the preview. I could have made a scene. I could have set the whole chapel on fire with a single word. But Mom, Ruth, was on the front row turning her wedding band like a prayer wheel, and Dad's oldest friend had driven 3 hours to speak. I swallowed anger like a penny, small and poisonous if you keep enough of them. Mark, Dad's partner and pallbearer, shifted his weight and glanced at Sloane in the sideways way people think is invisible to the grieving. I kept my eyes on the hymnal and opened my notes app under it. Time. Screen. Message text. Witnesses in the room. You don't drive an ambulance without learning chain of custody, even for things like betrayal. I wrote one sentence. No scenes today. Collect, don't combust. Protect Mom. The hymn ended. The coffin lid clicked on its soft hinges. Sloane dabbed a dry eye and squeezed my elbow like we shared a secret only marriage can handle. The second vibration spelled a room number again, and my jaw remembered restraint. Dad taught me how to hang a door so it doesn't argue with winter. Mark taught him how to pitch to venture guys who drink espresso like lies. Sloane taught me that optics keep the wolves away until they don't. In the hospice weeks, errands multiplied. I'll get the florist, she'd say, then text me to pick up the condolence book she forgot, then ask why I couldn't just be more presentable when people stopped by. We fought about nothing named and everything lived. Her voice asking if I needed all those shifts. Me asking why her phone turned face down when it buzzed. Last Thursday, in Dad's workshop, I found a scrap of paper with a date and M/214 in his tidy block letters. Dad's way of labeling tasks I never got to ask about. At the viewing, Mark had floated from group to group with the holy confidence of a man who never doubts a lens loves him. He was a handsome problem from the first time he helped Dad negotiate a lease. Sloane adored his strategic mind, which is rich person slang for not reading instructions. After the service, when the line of handshakes slid toward the doors, I saw Sloane's lock screen again as a nephew hugged her waist. Under an hour. Parked behind the ice machine. I told myself it could be anything. Room service, a dress fitting, a cousin's joke that didn't understand timing. The part of me that knows a pulse from a twitch didn't buy it. I texted Aunt Jo, the only person in the family who considers timestamps a love language. Need help quietly. She responded with a thumbs up and the 3 dots that mean Mercy is typing. Mark whispered something to Sloane and touched his tie like he'd rehearsed apologies. At the graveside, wind combed the grass into careful lines. Sloane stepped back from the family cluster to check on catering. Mark drifted toward the parking lot to take a call. My watch buzzed. Location ping. Sloane's iCloud device near Briarwood Motel. I hadn't set the alert. She had, months ago, after a gym parking lot theft. It never occurred to her to turn it off. The pin blinked 3 blocks from the cemetery. I opened my notes and logged it. 12:44 p.m. Briarwood, Building B. Aunt Jo slid up beside me with the ease of a relative who has learned how to talk through photographs. You look like a man about to build a raft, she murmured. Collect or combust? Collect, I said. Mom first. Mom was placing a rose on the casket lid like a yes. My hands memorized the weight of the moment and then got to work. At the wake, when casseroles went on linen and grief tried on performative small talk, I found Sloane's clutch on a sideboard and, without taking anything, took a picture of the visible hotel key card inside, the Briarwood emboss half covered by tissues. Sloane caught me looking at nothing. Eat, she said, voice bright. You get faint when you don't. Mark materialized to hug me with the distance of 2 men pretending to be brothers. Your dad was the best of us, he said, which is something people say when they're about to be the worst. My phone buzzed again with a calendar event. Room 214, 215, underlined. I drove past the motel on the way to the family house, because curiosity without evidence is just weather. Briarwood leaned against the highway like a tired confession, faded blue doors, vending machines that held sodas and secrets. I didn't go in. I photographed the marquee, the office hours, the security camera angles, and the no cash returned without receipt sign. Back at the house, neighbors stacked plates, and Mark took over the story of Dad's final deal like a man reading himself a bedtime story. Sloane kept refilling glasses, hovering near Mark's orbit like a moon that believes it creates tides. I slipped into Dad's workshop, the cedar-smelling rectangle where logic was worship. His old ledger lay open to a week with 3 entries labeled Mark, errand, underlined, the same day's hospice log Sloane, florist/pickup on the family whiteboard. I photographed both. Aunt Jo met me at the laundry room with a printout from the carrier's store. She'd sweet-talk them on her lunch break for call log assistance, using the stolen gym phone pretext. Mark's number, Sloane's number, a cluster of brief calls around the hospice nurse's lunch hour. She kissed my cheek in that aunt way that fixes your shirt and your childhood. "You sure you're not setting yourself on fire to keep the day warm?" she asked. "I'm sure I'm not lighting it," I said. "I'm just writing where the matches are." Sloane knocked on the doorframe, smile tight. "Guests are asking where the slideshow files are, Noah." "On the desktop," I said, and watched her check her watch like a habit. The motel text chimed again. 2:15 still works. Park by the ice. I wrote my rules on the back of Dad's program like a field medic taping instructions to a gurney. 1. No scenes today. 2. Collect, don't confront. 3. Protect Mom's perimeter. 4. Document everything with clocks and witnesses. Grief isn't a shield, it's a fog, and predators love fog. I set my phone to mirror its clock in every photo, then took a picture of the living room wall clock and the condolence table so time would have someplace to sit. Sloane drifted by, fixing frames that didn't need fixing, touching shoulders as if smoothing shock qualifies as love. "How are you holding up?" she asked. I was already looking for their next assignment. "On my feet," I said, which is true and not the whole. Aunt Jo tapped my elbow and whispered, "If you need an extra pair of eyes, I brought mine charged." We split roles. Jo would wrangle tech, the slideshow, the USBs, the projector, so I could stay near Mom. Sloane kept trying to station manage the optics. "Candles at an angle. Noah, the bow on the wreath is crooked. Uncle Hal shouldn't speak, he rambles." Meanwhile, Mark played host where he didn't live, refilling plates and telling the same story about Dad rescuing a contract from the brink until it sounded like he'd personally invented loyalty. Mom sat on the couch like a lighthouse, steady even when the weather pretended it had manners. I slid a cooling hand on her shoulder. "Eat something," I said. She nodded and patted my wrist twice, our family's Morse code for "I'm still here." In the kitchen, Sloane took a call, lowered her voice, then reappeared smiling like she had canceled a thunderstorm. Her phone flashed again. 10 minutes early, okay? And my pulse answered with steel. Tangible beats intuition, always. I asked the catering lead for a copy of the invoice for records, then snapped the corner where the delivery time sat next to a second address scratched out and rewritten. A neat 214 in the margin that didn't belong on lunch. I placed Sloane's clutch on the counter and asked, "Want me to grab the slideshow clicker from your bag?" She handed me the clutch without looking, because habit is a burglar's accomplice. Inside, lip gloss, lint, and a folded Briarwood receipt. 2 nights, same-day checkout. Room 214, guest M.R., plus additional guest S. Itemized, bottled water, 2 key cards, late checkout fee. A PIN line through cash, corrected to Visa. Last 4 digits I recognized from our joint travel card that was supposed to be frozen during hospice budgets. I photographed both sides beside the microwave clock. Aunt Jo slid in with a fresh napkin and the calm of someone who's taught teenagers to parallel park. "You have it," she mouthed. I nodded toward the receipt. "That's the trigger," she said, then opened her laptop and mirrored the slideshow to the TV. Public screen as alibi for whatever private thing she was about to do with timestamps. Sloane walked in, saw us at the counter, and turned on a smile that could frost burns. "Everything okay?" "Getting your clicker," I said, already in the bag she'd just handled, letting her see me take nothing, touch nothing, take only a photo like a librarian checking out truth. Mark's text pinged on her lock screen. "Back exit, now." And she tilted the phone away with the grace of a person who has rehearsed secrets into muscle memory. Aunt Jo whispered, "We've got enough for a map. Keep gathering road signs." Breadcrumbs needed placement. We drove, on the pretext of retrieving more ice, to the carrier store 3 blocks down. Aunt Jo, saint of plausible errands, handled the counter while I stood at a display of phone cases pretending to compare shades of black. She explained the gym theft geofence, asked how to view device location history, and watched as the rep pulled a map. Sloane's phone had hovered at Briarwood twice this week, overlapping with hospice nurse lunch breaks and floors pickups. Joe asked for a printed usage summary. Times, tower hops, no content, just logs. We left with a receipt and a polite smile that said customer service loves grief when it arrives with please and thank you. Back at the funeral home to return a borrowed stand, I asked the director, quiet man, cardigan of compassion, whether their exterior camera caught the side alley. He pulled a still from 2 hours earlier, Sloane and Mark stepping into the alley separately, then rejoining at the corner, a choreography they thought the day would excuse. I photographed the monitor with his permission, including the time strip. Next, Dad's workshop, the calendar whiteboard with errands, on Tuesday and Thursday coinciding with the motel's timestamp charges. I shot every square with a ruler in the frame for scale, like we do at crash scenes. On the way out, I passed Mom's bedroom. Her dress hung from the closet door, and her shoes were lined up like punctuation. I wanted to lie down and stop being a collection agent for pain. Instead, I returned to the living room, where Mark was telling someone how Dad taught him to measure twice. Sloane caught my eye and mouthed, "Can we talk?" as her phone buzzed again. The financials seemed split while the casserole lids were still warm. I noticed the business Amex, Dad's, on the coffee table where Mark had set his jacket. It was the one we were not to touch until the estate attorney inventoried everything. Sloane was at the sink rinsing plates with the focus of a penitent, and Mark had his sleeves rolled, charm at half-mast. A notification flashed on the Amex app. Aunt Jo had installed alerts last week at Mom's request. Briarwood Motel, $189. Approved. Card ending 0021. That card was Dad's business account, kept alive for final invoices. I felt my jaw set in increments. Joe met my eyes across the room and silently counted to 3. Our yes for proceed. I took a photo of the screen and another of the physical card's last 4 digits beside a note that read in Dad's hand mark, EXP. Approved for hospice deliveries only. Hospice deliveries do not include room 214. I texted Ms. Chun, the family lawyer who handled Dad's will. Need quick guidance re. Potential misuse of estate funds during funeral day. She replied within minutes. Document quietly. No confrontation today. We'll do verification with manager tomorrow. Sloane floated over with a plate of deviled eggs and a face that had practiced sincerity in good mirrors. You're pale, she said. Eat. You keep telling me that, I answered. What do you tell yourself? She blinked, then touched my forearm, the affectionate public gesture of a woman collecting alibis. Mark's phone lit with a message preview. Charge went through, back door. He locked the screen too fast to be innocent. I breathed like I tell patients to breathe when panic steals oxygen. Aunt Jo leaned in and said, "We're past suspicion. It's time to set the trap. A plan is a stretcher for chaos." I opened Dad's laptop on the workbench and built a timeline like a paramedic builds a med list. Clean, legible, no adjectives. Left column, timestamps. The chapel text, graveside ping. Alley camera still. Catering invoice with the mysterious 214. Amex alert, carrier logs. Briarwood receipt. Workshop calendar errands. Hospice lunch breaks. Right column, witnesses and sources. Pastor Daniels. Funeral Director Hayes, Aunt Jo, Ms. Gomez at the bank, Ms. Chin pending, motel manager TBD. I exported every photo to PDF with visible system time and a little ruler in frame so a future stranger could trust a present sorrow. Aunt Jo labeled thumbnails like a museum curator who knew grief would forget file names. What about Mom? She asked. She's the perimeter, I said. Nothing gets through that hurts her before it has a badge. MS. Chin called back and, in sentences that breathed for me, suggested a live verification tomorrow morning. Motel ledger and camera, then Dad's office to reconcile card usage, both with her on speaker. We would invite Sloan and Mark under the pretext of settling funeral expenses, so there'd be no excuse to skip. Originals only. No, I'll email later. Aunt Jo shaped the bait. A polite group text proposing a 9:30 a.m. meet to resolve bills before estate council closes accounts. Sloan replied instantly with thumbs up and confetti. Mark wrote, of course, then added, keep it simple. Emotions are high. Ms. Chun texted a checklist. Chain of custody. Request copies stamped true and correct. Note who touches what. Never raise your voice. I took Dad's program and wrote across the back. Quiet is not weakness. It's a choice of weapon. Tomorrow, they would bring originals, or the silence would scream fraud. Close calls look like kindness before they show their teeth. The guests thinned, and the house exhaled. In the hallway where Dad used to hang his coats, Mark intercepted me with a palm on my shoulder and condolences that weighed like a hand on a throttle. I know grief makes us see patterns, he murmured, breath minty, voice built for microphones. Don't let today turn into something unforgivable. I looked at the weave of his tie and thought about knots. Unforgivable has a ledger, I said. He smiled like a billboard. Sloan's undone, he whispered. She needs you to be the bigger person. Bigger than what? I didn't ask. In the kitchen, Sloan pressed a glass into my hand and touched my jaw with those careful, audience-aware fingers. I love you, she said too loudly, then lower. Let's not embarrass your mother. Aunt Jo sidled up with the calm of a woman who has seen stagecraft and knows the trapdoor. She flashed her screen just for me. The Amex alert expanded, authorization code, location matched to Briarwood's terminal ID. Cold enough? She whispered. I swallowed. In my ear, Ms. Chun said through the phone's tiny speaker, remember tomorrow. Verification is stronger than confrontation. Sloan's smile tightened when she saw I wasn't drinking. You're punishing me for helping Ruth, she hissed, then softened for the room again. Mark reappeared on cue, broad back, blocking a cousin's line of sight. For a second, the old carpenter part of me wanted to swing wood through lies. The medic part tightened the tourniquet on impulse and checked the clock. Mark's whisper curved like a hook. Call it off, or drown. At 9:28 a.m., Briarwood's office smelled like coffee that had forgiven many nights. A bell chimed as we filed in. Me, Aunt Jo with a tote labeled cables, Sloan in funeral black repurposed as corporate diplomacy, Mark dressed casual like innocence. The manager, a woman with a name tag that said BEA, met us with the professional kindness of someone trained to survive bad stories. Ms. Chun joined by speakerphone, voice steady enough to be a floor. We're reconciling charges on a card belonging to the deceased's business, I said. We need to review the ledger and camera for room 214 yesterday. B nodded, slid a clipboard across for a request form, then pulled the binder like a hymn book. Sloan chirped, is this really necessary? MS. Chun, yes. Mark said, we're wasting BEA's time. B. Not if the cardholder's estate asks. She printed the folio. Guest. M. R. Additional guest. S. Check-in 1:58 p.m. Keycard entries 207, 213. Device pings synchronized with the motel's Wi-Fi log. Aunt Jo photographed each page beside the wall clock. Camera? I asked. B pointed at a monitor and rewound to the timestamp. On screen, Sloan in a black dress walking past the ice machine. 3 minutes later, Mark, head down, same path. Sloan inhaled, then started a sentence she didn't finish. Ms. Chun asked B to stamp the copies true and correct, which she did with the gravity of a notary who likes her job. My hands stayed open at my sides, the way we hold them when a patient's family collapses and we need to be both present and clean. The manager slid the ledger forward and said, shall we? We crossed town to Dad's office, a rectangular honesty machine with windows that remembered storms. Mom waited in the conference room beside Ms. Chen's speaker. She'd insisted on attending because estates don't manage themselves. BEA's packet lay in the middle like a scalp under fluorescent lights. Ms. Gomez from the bank joined by video, neat as a checkmark. Card ending 0021 processed a Briarwood charge yesterday, she said. Terminal ID matches motel's merchant ID. She shared her screen. Authorization code. Time. Geotag. I placed Dad's sticky note on the table. Mark, EXP. Approved for hospice deliveries only. and let silence do the math. Mark went to indignation first. We used the room for setting up, storing funeral materials, he said. It was logistics. Ms. Chun, please produce a photo of the materials. Sloan said nothing. Then too much. It's not what you think, she started, a phrase that has never helped anyone, anywhere. Aunt Joe arranged the photos like a deck of proof. Alley camera still, carrier logs, the catering invoice with 214 in the margin, the Briarwood receipt, the keycard timestamps, the Amex alert, the workshop calendar, errands, M. Ms. Gomez confirmed the card belonged to the business account, not personal, not authorized for motel use. What about privacy? Sloan snapped. We buried your father. Mom folded her hands. We honored your father, she said. We are now honoring his books. Mark turned on me. You're destroying your family on a technicality. I met his eyes. Adultery is not a technicality. Charging it to my father is not logistics. Sloan reached for the receipt, and security reached for Sloan. Fallout travels faster than hearses. Ms. Chun filed a notice to secure the business account and requested the motel refund under fraud. A mess. Gomez froze discretionary spending pending inventory. Be emailed the stamped copies to the estate folder like a citizen who respects paperwork more than charm. I walked Mom to the elevator, our shoes speaking in gentle taps. I didn't want this today, she said. I wanted your father's goodness to be the only headline. It still is, I said, and meant it with my throat. Sloan texted from the curb. We can fix this if you stop involving outsiders. I replied with MS. Chin on copy. All future communication through counsel. Mark posted a vague status about witch hunts and grief parasites, and 3 people liked it like that meant the earth had moved. Aunt Joe changed the passwords on the slideshow account and archived the photos before anyone could rewrite yesterday. I called my captain at EMS to warn him of potential noise. He said, take the next 2 shifts off, Carpenter. Build something that heals. At home, I opened the drawer where Dad kept spare keys and found a note to me I'd never seen. Noah, measure twice when it's your heart. I measured. Then Ms. Chin called. Preliminary steps filed. Separation of finances. Temporary orders to protect Mom and the estate. Appointment scheduled to serve Sloan. I left the room and breathed in the garage where sawdust still remembered my father. Tomorrow's hearing would decide money, but tonight decided who we were. Healing is paperwork with naps between. I slept for an hour like a person who had survived a riptide, and then filled 4 pitchers with water because thirst arrives with truth. Mom came over with a casserole and a list. We called the therapist she trusted and booked 2 chairs for grief that didn't need to compete. Ms. Chun drafted a separation agreement that moved money into sunlight and locked doors without slamming them. I spent the afternoon making a practical altar, a manila folder labeled marriage, hold, a new checking account for my pay, a list of tools I'd loaned to Mark that would never return. Sloan emailed a long apology that had the architecture of a press release, passive voice, weather verbs, sorrow that didn't touch dates. I filed it. I ate. I drank water. I took the longest shower since Dad got sick and told the tiles what I would not say to her. Aunt Joe texted a photo of the Briarwood marquee in the rain with the caption, not our problem anymore. The judge granted a temporary restraining order on business assets and frowned in writing at inappropriate charges during a funeral day. Therapy at 6 was quiet. We spoke of Dad's hands and Mom's ring and the sound a casket lid makes, a sound I will never again pretend is universal. I drove home without the radio and made a list titled What I Keep. My name, my work, my ability to make tables that never wobble, my mother's spine, Aunt Joe's laughter, Dad's rules about measuring twice. I signed restraint into habit before anger appointed itself executor. Grief and betrayal can share a house if you teach them which drawer is theirs. I built a small cedar box in Dad's shop with a lid that stops softly and placed inside copies of the timeline, the stamped receipts, the note that said quiet is a weapon, and a photo of Dad sanding a plank as if making a table were a prayer. Then I wrote what I wish someone had once handed me on a single sheet titled, If You Learn About Betrayal at a Funeral. 1. Choose dignity first, no scenes. 2. Photograph clocks with evidence. 3. Ask officials, not friends. 4. Originals over copies, stamps over stories. 5. Keep your mother safe, perimeter before punchlines. 6. Separate finances immediately. Change passwords. Freeze vanity. 7. Eat, sleep, water. Rage is dehydrating. 8. Write nothing you wouldn't read aloud to a judge. 9. Invite counsel to speak before your anger does. 10. Remember, love and truth are not enemies. Spectacle is their enemy. I taped it inside the lid for some future Noah who may never need it. Outside, rain finally stopped tapping its patient code on the workshop roof. I stood under the loft and let the sawdust smell pass through me like a clean, old hymn. When I locked up, Mom was on the porch with 2 mugs and a look that understood more than I had said. He would be proud of how you carried him, she said, and of how you put everything back where it belongs. The next knock would be truth, and I was finally ready.